And we're back.
Yes, we're back.
Hold on.
After the briefest of hiatuses, maybe 50 minutes. So we are back in action, ready for more.
Yeah, how are you doing, Curtis?
Doing good. How was the last 50 minutes for you? Everything going okay?
It was a blur, you know. I think I have to at some point during one of our commercials, I'm gonna have to like run over and get my teapot, which I left over there. I was so thirsty after this morning's session. I had to go and try and get some tea in between shows.
Absolutely.
But for anyone who missed it, right, we had this epic exploration on the kung fu of tea just less than an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now moving on to the kung fu of flute, or as our guest has called it, kung flute.
Nice.
Curtis, I'm excited to introduce to you to another one of my friends, Mr. Cornelius Boots. He's master of the Shakuhachi Flute, but I'll let him explain to you what that means.
Excellent.
So,
hello. Welcome to the show.
Oh, all right. I just popped in there. Yeah, I just put the new link in Facebook so people knew where to go. Made sure I had my own show puer ready for the show. That was a great segment with John. It was really cool to see him in his place.
Yeah, really fun.
Oh, yeah. And if I recall correctly, Boots, you too have had tea under Master Wong as well. Am I right in saying
Yeah, I mean, that was how, I knew you through, music channels and all that. But then I met David Wei through a combination of tea people, and I went to Wenwu in El Cerrito for Qigong, where David Wei had gone a long time ago. So and then I was at one of your gallery showings, and that's where David and I met for the first time. And yeah, so the whole sort of Bay Area all down to Santa Cruz, puer snob tea community is I really miss it. Of course, because I moved out here to Pennsylvania in just a couple months ago, but also, after 2020, I was already missing it. So yeah, I hope we can rekindle that with people in different places. Steve Odell was also part of that, who lived in Santa Cruz, and he's doing very well in Portland. And so he's doing great with his kind of tea house in Portland, Oregon. And so yeah, I need to see what he's got, and I need to try 11Z's and Second Breakfast. Now I'm very curious, so I need to email John as soon as I get off here. Partly just to get the art, but also, of course, I want to taste it.
Oh yeah, that's that was the one missing component, and yeah, it's so great that the two of you are part of this, are playing tandem, right? Because it's that thing that we've been trying to do with the Comics Fu Show is to sit at those crossroads, right, and make those connections.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff you guys are doing. You guys are gonna ask me questions, I guess, but how is it feeling? This boiling. Speaking of the tea analogies, it's the pot is boiling for all this stuff is coming together in terms of actualization of comics and the community aspect, the actual work, the actual project, bringing it to fruition. Just how much has to go into final details of printing anything. Even just making a CD, and that doesn't have 100 pages or whatever. So when you've got all those pages and the layouts and the templates and the it's I know a little bit what it's like, and it's there's this principle of the whole project is this big, and then you do so much work and you've got 10% left, and then that just zooms in and that just gets this big, and then you do not. It's Zeno's paradox, if you guys are familiar with that, right?
I was just thinking of it as Zeno's arrow, right? It's the arrow that never hits the target. It's only just covering the distance by half.
You're always halfway. Yeah, you're always halfway there. And from what I understand, they just ignored it, right? They just nobody's ever really dealt with it. If you even just across the room, how do you get across the room? At some point, you're always halfway across, and then you're halfway across that, and so on. By what? So I think it calls into question space-time this is where the East-West thing needs to get together, and I'm sure
Yeah. Well, okay. So here, let me throw. I was introduced to this comic, this concept. I've been swapping words around.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
So I was introduced to that concept in a comic of all places. And I like to read widely, but it was in an issue of the Books of Magic published by DC Comics.
Nice.
And the young protagonist who was, really a proto Harry Potter, we can say.
Right.
He was trying to like escape from the castle of the person that had captured him while he was traveling around in the land of fairies. And the castle's wall was Zeno's paradox, so that no matter how high he climbed, he only ever got halfway.
I hate when that happens. It's always something when you're a prisoner in a castle.
Definitely. On the arrow concept, I always think about like Machiavelli talking about the goal. Like if you're shooting with an arrow, if you aim at the target, you're always going to come up short if the target's far away. So the idea is always to aim above and beyond the target. So when the arrow naturally falls, you hit the target, And the hard thing is when you're in the middle of any creative endeavor, right? You don't know how high you should do it. It's just this constant, process of missing the mark, going over.
Well, the first time through, that's why I think it's really good, Patrick, you're doing volume 2 launched yesterday, because it's still fresh, in terms of this whole process, the crowdfunding, the perks, the communication, the community, and then actually finishing and sending stuff out.
And so, speaking of communication, what better timing than one of the granddaddies of communicating comics, right? Yeah. So, quick shout out to Pops, who's like a hardcore advocate for independent comic creating. He's just so willing to build bridges and just get people together. So he's got another one of those, wise man on the mountaintop vibes, but with such an open door. It's amazing.
Definitely.
And then
cool.
We've got another guest showing up.
There's Bane. I don't know what time it is for him, but it's the middle of the night.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Kristen Briggs has been popping in on a couple of these broadcasts. So that's been kind of fun to keep the conversation going. But
he plays flutes just as big as I play.
Oh, yeah?
Is that so?
Yeah, he's a student of mine and is doing very well with the big bamboo, which is a lot trickier than it might seem. It's one of those deceptively simple things, and we've talked about this before, but that's 10 p.m. Okay, that's not too late. It's not past his bedtime, I guess, yet, but he's in Nottingham, so we've also got a little Robin Hood connection here, more mythology, but the distillation of certain arts in the do, in a lot of Japanese do, the way of ikebana, or the archery, or the Japanese version of the tea ceremony, or shakuhachi do, they're distilled and they're minimized for heightened effect of the power of the elements that remain, let's say, which is kind of will lead you into ideas of alchemy. And I feel like alchemy and dragons are two things that have a long, deep history, both East and West. And I find that really interesting. But alchemy in the East was more in the Taoist side of things. And because Shakuhachi is a physical skill, and because I started doing Qigong in 2001 at the same time I started Shakuhachi, I've always been like, it's from Japanese Zen, and the history is obviously very murky, but there's enough lore, and the pieces we play are basically from Buddhist monasteries, but the whole thing is like Taoist to me, and it's like playing the flute is Qigong practice to me. I think someday there will be an embracing of that, maybe, in the Zen community, but for instance in the Bay Area, nothing against Soto Zen. Soto Zen knows how to do stillness. I'll give them that. But for instance, you get up, if you do a whole day of sitting, you get up, and the first thing some of us are going to want to do is like, you know, and that's not really part of the vibe there. So there's that slight friction, I guess, between Buddhist side of things and Taoist side of things, which is why a lot of people and a lot of new translations and new authors have this, you know, Chan as the connecting piece, which is really what it would have been called in the Golden Age in China. I mean, Zen's Golden Age was in China.
Yeah, talking about dropping so much info in just what, 2 sentences. You know, that's exactly what I'm here for. But let's quick give a shout out to Pops again, right?
Uh-huh.
Did he just did it? Curtis, you got the reading voice.
Yeah. No, Pops just said, did he just call me the Ancient One? Honored and humbled at the same time. Means a lot coming from you, my friend. Well, you know, I'm gonna say ancient, but Pops is influential, right? You notice that we don't even use his full name, Pops Van Sant, when you know you've made it and you know everybody knows you in the community, when you just say the first name and everybody knows. So that's why everybody says Pops. Everybody in comics knows he's like the Don of independent comic books. So that's what we mean by that, Pops.
Yeah, and I mean the same with Boots, right? I mean, it's just.
I don't know if I'm not the Ancient One yet, but I'm aspiring to that. I definitely like that's the you know, the sage, the wizened sage is the goal. I think we've got a comic already right here, Ancient One and Zeno's Paradox. That's your next project.
There you go. You heard it here first, people.
Yeah.
We
just want to hear a little bit of flute, huh?
Yeah, that would be amazing, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if Curtis had any questions since the last. Okay, well, really quick, right? Boots and I had a few conversations over the course of my Volume 1 campaign, which was so awesome. It was great to reconnect, and also quick shout out. We're talking to one of my revered wuxia warriors in the flesh. So
yeah, you know, it's two times now. I was
2-time wuxia warrior.
I'm not going to pass that up.
Duty.
Yeah,
but I just had to get that out there before Curtis. You know, you can deliver your question.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I heard you mentioning about qigong, and you know, of course, you know, you're a musician. That idea of the breath, right? The breath, whether it's the breath in its literal sense or the figurative sense or the metaphysical sense, I would imagine there's a lot of interplay with that. Like, how did you, where did you first start? How would you describe that connection between those two practices and what you do with the shakuhachi?
Yeah, I mean that question is completely on point, because as a, like, what I would call, I don't know, high power classical jazz and avant-garde reed virtuoso, which is what I was before I started shakuhachi, and I only use that word in the non-humble sense, because you're going to hear how humbling shakuhachi was right after that. But it became more and more clear how the breath, and specifically rooting the actual inhale and then the exhale from the dantian, was how anything really worked on all wind instruments, but especially woodwinds, especially reeds. Partly because the reeds are held this way. So I also played silver flute, but the flute held this way, you've got this other kind of dimension going on. Whereas clarinet, bass clarinet, saxophone are held in front of you, as well as oboe and bassoon, the double reeds. So it takes a while to figure out that this thing in your face, there's no power generated from the face. There's certain power in the reed itself that's embedded, just like in the string on a guitar, like the tension in the string that's being held there is the power that you're sort of overcoming, the resistance you're overcoming to get a tone. And so you get in this very, what I imagine the same in martial arts, where the power comes from and where the movement is seen, or in this case where the resonance or sound is felt, are spatially distant, because the power is just here. really. And everything happening up here is just like connecting to that. And you get this kind of circulation going when it's really feeling really good. And so there is just like, you basically, as a woodwind player or any wind instrumentalist, you cannot go wrong to obsess about looking into different modalities of breath, whether it's going to be pranayama or what we do in different kinds of qigong. I mean, the irony is the kind we do at Wenwu, we're not coordinating the moves with inhale and exhale. It's one of the few qigongs where we're not doing that. The one I did for 10 years before that, it was that way. So that links a conscious movement to the inhale and the exhale in this kind of flow-based, timed way. But again, just so distilled. You know, when you're playing difficult music, orchestral or jazz music, there's just so much going on. And so the reason like Qigong seemed like the right place for me, because it went with what I was reading in Zen, reading in Chuang-Tzu or Lao-Tzu, and then eventually right at that same point, what Shakuhachi presented was just so much space, you know, getting rid of the complexity, and I don't want to call it clutter because it has its place. You know, complexity builds up and there's an artful way to do that. But you want to get back to first principles, to steal a phrase from Charles Eisenstein, who I've been listening to a lot. And that's what I wanted to do, you know, and then the sound of the shakuhachi, and the fact that it's played solo unaccompanied in pieces that are very hard to understand what's happening until you get into it. But they're very evocative, very elemental. It sounds like, oh, this is just breath converted to tone, and maybe like a couple other things going on, but that's almost it. Actually distilled.
That's amazing, and I like how you hearken to concepts, right? You know, like when you learn any art form, you start with the technique,
Right,
but the technique is really just a gateway to the concept. And once you have the concept, then many techniques can come from it, you know. But you have to go through that to get to that abstract idea, you know. It's like in the Kung Fu I do, in the Hong-Ga system, our highest level form is all about breath and intonations and hitting different vibrations, you know.
Wow.
And the funny thing is so there's, first you see it as there's the physical movement and then the qigong. And for those watching that don't know what qigong is, it's the breath work, it's the energy work, right, that we're trying to cultivate. In Japanese, they refer to it as ki, Chinese qi, right, the life force, the vital energy. And the funny thing is that the idea that these are two disparate things, when you first do the physical and then you separately focus on the breath and the energy. But in reality, when you get to a certain level, it's all energy, right? We're trapped in this vessel. You have to breathe, no matter what you do. It's just a question of if you're doing it right or wrong, you know. Or
well, I sometimes call the breath the primordial addiction. You're stuck in that in out, like you can't get out of that. If they're not doing anything else, if you're not doing that, you've got a lot of problems. There's a domino effect from that. I also like to explain that with breathing, because our conscious self kind of goes wandering in the night, in dreamless sleep, and then in different astral realms in REM sleep, you can make a case, but you're still breathing there. You can make a strong case that you're breathing more than you are you. Because when you're asleep, you know, if you knew you were you when you were sleeping, you'd always be able to lucid dream. In other words, you'd be like, boom, I'm dreaming. Let me go do some cool stuff that I wrote about in my comic book. But so you have your identity in a way, but meanwhile the breath is still going, and it has this quintessence connector. But what you describe is very important, because that forms a feedback loop. And as you've discovered with students, I imagine the same as me with my students, and then seeing them deal with it helps me get better at it. Is it doesn't really matter where you enter from. You know, as long as you're not dominated. It's not just say the technique is really what's important. This breath stuff, I just got to do it because my teacher says so. No, either one could be somebody's entry point, and they form a positive feedback loop over time. And that separation is the third step of alchemy. there's a lot of models of alchemy, but the Rosicrucian model, the third level is separatio, and then the fourth level is conjunctio. And so that we know that with anything that's technique and skill based, is you've got to focus on, just that, just this this muscle or this finger or whatever. But then of course you got to reintegrate it with the whole thing, and so on. I mean, that's why it's fun. That's why it's like, I mean, how did you balance, Curtis, doing as much kung fu and teaching as you've done with your comics that you've done?
Oh. Well, it's balance. I always tell this funny story, and I learned a lot about an interesting view of balance from somebody that's not from a spiritual path per se. But I used to do some concept art in film, and one of the people that I work with close hand was the actress Michelle Rodriguez, and we worked on like a project that went on for a while. And she said, if you know, she's a person of extremes. And the funniest thing she said about balance is, she goes, people think balance is just a straight line. She goes, but really balance is like what you're trying to achieve. And there's highs and lows, and you hit the balance in between the highs and lows. And so she referred to it as the pulse that you have when you're at the hospital. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, and the balance is in the middle. And when you achieve complete balance, flat line, right? So for me, I don't know if it was, I actually took quite a bit of time away from the art, because I was focusing on the kung fu, and I was trying to explain to my parents why I went to art college and took so much time doing that, and then I just essentially abandoned it to do kung fu. And what I explained to them is, I said, all the drawings I used to do of people jumping and kicking and doing these amazing things to pretend, so I can do that in real life. I don't need to pretend anymore and draw it. But then kind of wrap it up. What happened is, teaching, I wanted to get more people to know about kung fu, about martial arts, what I care so much about. And the entry point of doing the actual art requires a lot of commitment. I mean, and a lot of physical exertion, So the idea that I think for all of us, we all have these things that we learned from previous generations, especially in the Asian traditions, we have this background. And the realization is, it doesn't belong to me. I've just been entrusted to be the safeguard to it. And my job, innovation's great, but my job is to try and bring it intact to the next generation. So that's where actually, when I went back and I said, okay, well, I have this art background. Can I dive into this and promote the art and share the art that way? So that's kind of the balance. The balance has been up and down and all around, but the passion and the goal is always the same. So that's
and now you would say they're integrated pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. And what's fascinating with breath is, we're talking about Asian stuff. You look at Asian calligraphy, right? And you see the brushstroke. By doing martial arts, even when I was in art college, I started realizing I was using my breath to draw, to get the line work, to get the forcefulness of it. And then it was so fascinating when I would go to museums and look at Japanese Zen calligraphy. It's like I could almost hear the breath looking at the brushstroke. I could see where they tapered off the breath with a quick brushstroke, or where they exhaled really hard, pushing the brush, inside the canvas, and it's that idea that like art encompasses all senses, When we hear you play your music, I see colors, not literally, but in a way, yes, and so I think that's so important. They're all paths to the same goal, right? So
there's a lot of overlap, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, now that we've gone that far into, do you think we might be able to hear a little bit of?
Yeah, I've got a lot of different kinds of flutes, and so I wanted to do a little old-timey pilgrim's hymn on one of these rustic flutes where I wanted to make sure the maker did not trim the roots too much, because it's kind of groovy that way. So this was the root ball. Some of you watching already know this, but so this was in the ground, and when they have to harvest, this would have been about ground level here. It's hard work harvesting. You've got to know what you're doing in terms of looking for what diameter, what kind of node placement. So on the one hand, this is totally just rustic, like we're just playing on like a tube, like a stick, essentially. Like take it out of the ground, get rid of the membranes, put some holes in it, and chop this top off here. And that's it, compared to, making a saxophone, for instance, in the factory. This is very distilled, very rustic, very nature emergent. On the other hand, to be able to play some of the repertoire and the challenging repertoire that we're expected to train in from both the solo Zen tradition or from some of the more like chamber music tradition stuff, or even just the folk songs, it's got to have certain characteristics to be able to operate, and those characteristics get incredibly subtle. But this is a bit wider. A lot of the flutes that I play and my students play are a wider bore. I don't have the small flute out right now, but this is pretty hefty already for a shakuhachi. But the main point here is 4 finger holes in the front, 1 in back, and the end is just open. It's just a tube. So when I first saw this in 2001, I had no idea how does this make a sound. This was a section that was taken out of the fushi, and so it forms a little crescent shape, but it's not like crafted. It just sort of appears because the walls are really thick, if that makes sense. So this part is taken out, and this is kind of sanded down. So all this is kind of smooth. But it's like any flute, and I'm going to talk more with Patrick about this for one of the drawings in volume 2. But you have to, the flute, here's the quick flute lesson. It's 2 things, airstream and position. So both of those things are very involved. But the airstream is essentially just, so there's a very narrow stream of air that you can direct and keep consistent. So that involves the lips, which we call the embouchure. That involves all the breathing like we were talking about. But then position includes all of the big stuff that a bunch of Kung Fu people would know anything about. Anybody who does the physical performing arts or any kind of arts, ballet, even if you were a rock climber and, kayaker, you're going to understand about position, and balance is going to mean everything from your little toe to your ankle, to your shoulder blades, to your neck, to where your ears are and your head. And so, but specifically, where does this go? Here, in order for that airstream to hit where it needs to hit to make a sound. So a transverse flute held this way has a smaller distance to go across, essentially the same as playing one of our finger holes. So you can see it's just this short, whatever this is going to be. On this flute's about 14 millimeters, maybe 13 across that. Whereas this, proportionally, is way, way bigger. So I try to use the analogy of like if you're used to riding a certain kind of bicycle, and then you get on a bicycle that's like 25% bigger, you're going to really notice that. So to the average person, they have no idea of what we're up to with the wider bore. But anyway, and there's no lacquer in here, so that's the other way that this is a more rusticated kind of a practice. But anyway, this is a goaik, a pilgrim's hymn from sometime, I don't know, 1300s Japan.
Amazing. Beautiful. Beautiful, absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an evocative piece. I had memorized it. Actually, this is another like little connection to the past there, Patrick. I think I was in Alameda house or dog sitting or something, and that's when I memorized this for the first time in 2007, and I really had to figure out what is the phrasing, how does this work. It's in a scale that's not a lot of the other pieces that we play. The origins of these pilgrim hymns is still pretty misty to me. Maybe some of the ologists have uncovered useful information, but I haven't asked them because the ologists also tend to say that all the things we say about the history of our instrument isn't actually true because they can't find it written down. Even though this is basically also an oral tradition. So we have minor amounts of that to deal with compared to the martial arts, but it's the same thing, you know. But this piece came from somewhere, and it's like I couldn't write a piece like that. It sounds like from a totally another time and place to me. So it's fun to try to deal with it.
Definitely.
I mean, it's just so evocative of like almost every kung fu movie in your that you might dream of, right? Like you may not ever find like where that track is, but it's just so in the mind of that realm, or you know, it's just part of that vision, you know. And that's one of the things I remember long ago when you were you know, just I don't know if I can say it like transitioning, or like just when you were really bringing out some of your early compositions of the flute.
Yeah.
And you know, you were doing this at there was like one cafe where you were presenting, and I just ended up doodling a whole comic strip on
Oh yeah, that's
on
right.
a receipt while you were playing, because it just was creating these images, and we're sitting there, sipping our drinks, and I was like, oh man. And so I ended up with this little improvised one-page comic that I just had to leave it with you, because I was like, here, these are your liner notes, I guess.
I remember that. That's awesome. That's scanned in somewhere. It's on one of these external hard drives here. I got to dig that out.
One thing technically I noticed it, and you can kind of, I'm not sure if I saw correctly, but I thought was fascinating is it appeared like you were actually using your chin as almost like an extra hand to create leverage and actually reposition the flute to create a bigger gap while you were playing. Was that something that I was noticing? Because it seemed very fascinating to see that.
Very, very perceptive of you. Yes. So often with new students, I'll point out how, like, especially people who, like myself, coming from woodwinds that have, no flute. So the other great thing about this that's like very nerdy but very interesting is it's a 5-hole flute. We have this scale, which is a common scale, minor pentatonic or major pentatonic if you start here. And but this hole is actually redundant, because if we open it, we get the same note as everything down in the next octave, which is how all woodwinds work. You change the length from longest to shortest, and then you go back to longest, but at the overtone level, and then you do the high notes. So it really is designed. It is a spiral, but this is redundant. So really, it's a 4-hole flute. But anyway, I digress. You don't have anything in the middle here. So the middle fingers have just bamboo holding function, as I say. And so the thumb back here and this middle finger are holding the flute. And then I say, okay, what's the counterbalance for this middle finger here? And the obvious guess is this thumb, but this thumb has a whole covering function. So it can't be the counterbalance because it's going to be open some of the time. And it's the chin is the counterbalance to this middle finger. And it's part of what makes these bigger flutes feel difficult at first, because they're not going into this divot here where the main, and everybody's physiology is so different. So you get some classic old dudes in Japan that you can still find on YouTube, and maybe their chin is totally flat and wide and they don't really have much of a divot, or the other way around. But either way, you can't get used to just nestling this in here to play, because now it's up way too high. But the other thing you're noticing is how this is a pivot for all other pitches. How do we get the in-between notes? How do we get the chromatic scale? 12 notes in the octave, but we've only got essentially 4 holes. So it's with this technique. Thank you, Bane. It's with this technique here where we redirect the airstream down and adjust what I call the breath reach. And so it's got this whole slidey thing going on. This is why the more of us that could play, and the more of us that are available for recording sessions for martial arts, kung fu related films and video games, the better off everyone will be, because these are the only flutes that really do that. All the other natural material wooden flutes do a little bit of that, but they're, for instance, doing it with the finger holes. They'll go and try to sound like what we sound like. But this is a whole nother in terms of this slide quality. Not just a slide quality, but a slide that includes a different texture, going from loud to quiet, or from shadowy to bright, plus a lot of breath effects, which is our main stereotypical. That's featured in Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel. So actually that's, I probably told this story last time that I was on, where a lot of outside of Japan, people that first got into shakuhachi, I believe, this is just anecdotal, my own personal research, were keyboard nerds who played the Yamaha DX7, and it had that sound on it, shakuhachi, and it went whoo, whoo, whoo. It was like a sample or synthesized version with all that breath at the front. And that's what they're doing in the movies. That's often what you want. Somebody shows up out of it and you want the or whatever. So we have a lot of sound effects though, which is more nature. You don't need a human drama for those to make sense. Our in the repertoire is not about like the protagonist and the adversary, and we're playing this tune for them. So in that sense, I'm glad we're not brought in to some soundtracks that would be sort of co-opting our vertical trees and forests, nature, kind of monastic mindset for like, human drama, which we don't need more of that really.
This is exactly why I had to like feature one of your playlists as like a read along, as a soundtrack for reading A Tiger's Tale, right? And just like set up a place so that anyone who backed Volume 1 could also go to the website and get your playlist and just like
because we were packing and moving when that came out, I was a little remiss in not putting those together. But I've been thinking about it still. And also I'm not very good at Spotify. So ultimately I feel like we'll have maybe 3 or 4 to choose from on Spotify, and the same on YouTube. Partly because there's a bunch of small flute pieces, there's a bunch of big flute pieces, then there's live performances, and then there's album performances.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which, why don't you? I don't think Curtis is as intimately aware as I am with your work on the Wood Prophecy, which was just released last year, if I remember correctly.
And, so that was a group that came sort of organically. I mean, kind of like you. Oh, I'm an artist now, martial arts now. I'm drawing art of martial art. It all kind of integrates. A similar thing happened to me where my main group, why I moved to the Bay Area, was a bass clarinet quartet called Edmund Wells. There were a lot of bass clarinetists in the Bay Area and a bunch of other people that I already knew. And so that was my main focus. And shakuhachi was still kind of just a hobby because it takes a while. I don't want to say it's difficult. It's easy to say it's difficult. I mean, I would like to be on a panel somewhere, an international panel, where I would make a strong case that it is the most difficult instrument known to humans. Whatever, violin, French horn, oboe. These are these are tricky, but they've got nothing on what we're up to with this. On the other hand, David Wei, I'll use him as an example, as a great example. People who are kung fu people, outdoor sports people, meditation people, maybe sometimes yoga, they can often enter this instrument at a higher level because of the mind-body balance constellation that some part of them understands. And I hope it's all right to revisit this without David's permission here. But when I helped him get a flute, and we just did a short trade, I did a short lesson, and he showed me some stuff. He was doing typical stuff, you know. Let me see if I can imitate it. You know, basically all beginners, it's kind of like. And that could go on for like 4 months. And so David did that for a couple minutes, and then all of a sudden he dropped into like Kung Fu Master mode, and he was like. Just like that. So in a way, to the modern human that's very in their head and very used to, here's a set of techniques and apply these, and this is how the sound is produced. Or frankly, we're used to push button instruments. No offense to piano players, but it's a push button instrument compared to a flute. It's about a state of mind and understanding, okay, the body has an intelligence. The breath is fueling both the intelligence of the body and the mind and connecting all these together. So it is difficult, but if you understand about balance, you can kind of enter through kind of a side gate. That's the small dragon gate. So anyway, I was practicing, taking lessons on shakuhachi, but the bass clarinet was my main thing, and the quartet. But eventually I had done pretty much everything I felt like I needed to. All this bamboo was calling for me to do more, to let my lips and fingers only deal with them. So I had to let go of those other instruments, but I've already written and recorded a bunch of stuff for that, especially the 4-bass clarinet format. There was no plan, but eventually, organically, a kind of a 4 Taimu, which is the name of these bigger wide bore, what I sometimes just call bass shakuhachi, sort of emerged in 2019. And so I wrote one piece that premiered in 2019 for 4 of us playing together, and then realized that was actually the first movement of a whole 5-movement suite that is called Wood Prophecy. And it came out, it was very rewarding. It came out really good, I think, because I've been writing for a small group, or what I call same instrument quartets, since about 1996. And so it's just another way to experience the timbre of this instrument. There's a kind of a both and. It seems like a paradox or a contradiction, but really it isn't. I mean, our solo unaccompanied pieces that we have from the Zen monastic repertoire in that tradition is so important. Like, there's nothing else like that on the planet either. There's no solo unaccompanied woodwind solid repertoire and tradition. If somebody knows of one, put it in the comments. You get a few Bach flute sonatas, you get the ney flute playing some solos and Sufi dervish music, but there's no like piece after piece and a long history of it. And part of why I think that is for this is there's so much subtlety. So we don't need other people coming around throwing stuff in the mix there. Where it's like us and the bamboo and the breath and the notes, the intervals. We've got plenty to deal with. So it was never really the plan to come up with an ensemble piece. But you know, I also am a riff crafter. My new term. I've let go of riffology because I decided to not be an ologist of any kind, even though I'm always studying stuff. And so things like is really fun for me to do. You have to do circular breathing. You have to lay down a solid groove. It's got forward motion. This kind of medium tempo baseline riff is something that I really gravitate to as a player. So I incorporate that in my solo and accompanied pieces over the years. But eventually it was like, yeah, I just want to do that. And I can get some of my students that are sounding really good to jump on top of that with melodies or solos and other parts. So that's how it grew, just very organically. And that's what Wood Prophecy is all about. I mean, that's what the musical part is all about. What the concept is about, you'll have to go to the old Bandcamp. It's only on Bandcamp because the pieces are like 12, 15 minutes long, all the movements. So Apple and Spotify, you don't get that long form kind of. Yeah, it's just not. It's not a TikToker album. I don't even know what TikTok is, but I know that it involves small time increments. This is like old. I was like, no, this is going to be a substantial. So it has the same scope. I think is why Patrick's excited that I also completed it, and it came out also around the same time you guys were. I mean, it does have an epic proportion to it. I'd written a lot of multi-movement pieces before, but this is 5 movements, and it's about maybe 50 minutes total. So that's as a composer, you don't always get that. It's more and more challenging.
Once you hear, like you have on your YouTube channel, you have like one of your debuts with your quartet, I think, during probably before you really formalized Wood Prophecy. And then once you hear it, you can't get that out of your head, so.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know when we're going to be playing, Carnegie Hall, but it's going to be a long haul, I think. I think it's the timbre of this and the idea that there's multiple ones of us. I even had a colleague who has, I'm always looking for who can help me book shows. This is a big riddle for performers, especially avant-garde instrumentalists. And I was talking to someone who has a pretty successful woodwind chamber group about their booking person. And I thought, one flute, just playing this like solo, if I'm going to play some of my pieces and some meditation stuff, that might be a little hard for an audience. But, a group of us, maybe there would be more to get into because they've done a lot of studies on this, like busking. If you're playing by yourself out on the street, you don't make nearly as much money as 2 of you playing. And then if you were to split it, people are just attracted to a group. In fact, as a musician, that's the main thing. If you meet somebody on the plane or you're a musician, they'll either say, do you have any shows coming up, or do you play in a band? Even almost before what instrument do you play, although they usually ask that too. So people are just very attracted to the interaction of different people doing stuff together. But this guy was like, I don't know if you want to try to come out with like four shakuhachi, maybe just try to book your solo stuff first. So they're only dealing with one. But yeah, I think once you get over that, but I mean, some of you are primed for it. I mean, this is why, like I say, the tea community, the Kung Fu community, I'm very interested in seeing if some of the stuff I've been doing is like a good, inspiring soundtrack for doing work or practice too.
Definitely. I mean, I can say just from hearing your performance today, Kung Fu people strive to look as cool as you sound. So we spend our so that's my first thought.
I'm gonna use that quote.
Yeah, you can quote me on it. You can go. And the other thing is, I was going to think is you used the word monastic, right? And I think that is so out of the common vernacular because very few people practice anything that comes from a monastic background at this point. So many art forms have been distilled to that whole secular kind of aspect of things. As a traditional Kung Fu style, it's the same thing. You're talking about the length of the piece. I remember when I went to my friend's Taekwondo school, he was a Taekwondo instructor. And I made a big faux pas. I didn't realize it. He had one of his students perform a sequence of movements, a set. And after the sequence was very short, for us as Hongastas, our sets are long even for Kung Fu people. And Kung Fu sets are very long because of that monastic root. Right. But when you have something like Taekwondo that's fairly modern, came through a militaristic kind of standpoint. So they did their set, and after they were done, I asked my friend, I said, that's really nice. I said, is that a beginner's form? Is that a white belt form? And he goes, no, that's one of our black belt forms. And I was like, oh, because the most basic thing that I've learned within my Kung Fu curriculum is longer, 3 to 4 times longer in sequence and to some degree complexity than even the black belt form. Not not to knock it, we're just talking about curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Depth of ability, something different, right? But it's that idea when you've trained in something that's a monastic art form, your perspective is different because these are people who did it for self-development, for a spiritual component, where it's not about that cookie cutter factory, get it out, how many people can we get? It's more, instead of me coming down the mountain to teach you, you come up to the mountain to learn from me, right?
Exactly right. And now that's another riddle. How do you do the Master on the Mountain marketing plan? It's very difficult. You're working against yourself.
I made a career out of it, you know. And I often say to my students, you watch the Kung Fu movie, and the Kung Fu movie is about the student, the Kung Fu student climbing up the mountain to see the master, right? That's a nice story. You never hear the story of the master, right? He's freezing his ass up off on top of the mountain, looking down, looking at people walk 2 steps up the stairs and leaving. 1 step up the mountain, leaving. And, my God, when is somebody going to come and take my art from me? I'm getting old. I'm getting tired, right?
Exactly. I need some different kind of noodles to eat up here. I hope somebody brings something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'll just mention, speaking of that, like sort of hermit idea. I'm assuming you've maybe both seen Amongst White Clouds, and if you haven't,
I haven't.
I would definitely check it out because there's a book. Red Pine did a book that's like, this is a bad one because I can't remember his book. Somebody put it in the past. Red Pine did a book where he visited in the 80s the mountain hermits that were still in the mountains in China. And then a young filmmaker kind of recently, like 15 years ago, went back on that same, tried to redo some of his path there in the Zhonggong Mountains, I think it is. And visits a bunch of these different hermits. And it's so awesome because they are real human beings, and they're also very different from each other. This is what's so cool about it. There's like definitely one guy that I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying what he's selling, but he's very entertaining. But a bunch of other ones, and there's a nun in there, and they're all doing what you'd expect. They're boiling their vegetables and trying to figure out where their water comes from, and writing calligraphy and poetry, and but none of them are playing big flutes. So I feel like this is our like when you first get into shakuhachi, that becomes this hermit fantasy really, because there's so much to do with just this flute. You'd be like, yeah, this rounds out this idea of being a hermit. Like there would be no way you would get bored. Plus it feeds into your scripture reading and your meditation and breath. Chi, you'd stay in shape. So yeah, that's a big part of the appeal. It's just the work isn't going to end. But I see what you're saying about longer. Yeah, like for instance, the piece I'm trying to memorize now, compared to the piece I played, this will probably be 12 minutes or so at the end of it. But this is the notation we're dealing with as well. Not everybody has this notation we're dealing with, but this is this particular. You get different penmanships, so you might see this also kind of penmanship. So it is calligraphy scores, katakana syllables. Yeah. So yeah, these solo pieces are really, really long. I don't know what time it is, but maybe I should play the beginning of this one I'm trying to memorize, and then we'll think about wrapping it up. What do you guys feel about that?
Sounds great. Sounds like a plan. Amazing. Oops, I just kicked him out of the stream. I was so excited. I just, sorry. You're Patrick. There. Sorry, it was amazing. That was absolutely stunning. Thank you.
I think that was my bad, but yeah, we were just so moved, Boots.
Oh, absolutely.
That's about 5.5 lines in, but I love the opening of this piece, which is part of why I wanted to memorize it. It's got the additional effect, this breath pulsing effect that's in some of our pieces. There are some sects that do this on every piece. So a piece that we might learn as a couple other sects might play it already, that same phrase with the breath pulsing. Instead of just sustaining it. So we've got a bit of that mixed into the repertoire I learned, and this piece is one of them that has it at the beginning. It has a lot of low notes at the beginning, which is my favorite. The low notes.
Well, you're getting a lot of love. Yeah. Here's Stephanie Nina Pizzarello, a good friend and also a wuxia warrior, so a kung fu sister to you, Boots.
That's exciting.
I love all of these connections.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. I love that undulating tone that you had there with that one part that you really like, for lack of a better, like, luxurious, the sound of it, amazing.
It just tells a story. Like the story is just there to be like discovered more than anything else.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. It does have real narrative qualities for sure. And the other key thing about it is, which is a big contrast to like I say, the riffs and playing things that I do, like with grooves and bassline riffs, is Honkyoku, which is the name of this Zen repertoire, is really unique, not just for the other reasons that I already preached about, but it's completely pulse free. So for instance, if you were going to do a folk song and have something like that's got a beat, and that's like most music, especially if you're going to sing or play with other people. Then we've got lullabies that I've sort of freed up. They also have a melody, and Japanese lullabies, I mean, at least the ones we've learned, are pretty fun to demonstrate because they're a little dark for people as a lullaby, but like that's obviously got a melody, but I'm stretching and compressing parts of it because you figure that's somebody probably singing by themselves. And the Pilgrim hymn I played earlier is further on the spectrum of really dissolving this idea of pulse. And then these monastic pieces are completely pulse free. There's no beat, and it's not even anywhere nearby. I would say. Even though we're like, the breath pulsing sounds like, okay, that's a pulsing that comes from the breath, but it's not like there's a metric that we're lining up with. And this is another thing, you're only really allowed to do that solo unaccompanied. As soon as you're playing with other people, you got to have a way of trying to figure out about playing together. And as a woodwinder, Western music woodwinder, you're never playing by yourself. You're an ensemble player, almost, like I say, 99% of the time. So how are you going to be a hermit if you have to do that?
How are you going to be a hermit in this modern day, right?
Yeah, that's the question.
Definitely.
Support our Kickstarter, folks. So we can be hermits.
That's right. Then you've got good reading material. It'll be shipped right to you.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it immensely. That was amazing. Really. Excellent.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This was really fun. Good to have a chat. We could go for. It would be. I mean, I don't know what the schedule is going to be coming up. Putting schedules together, but it would be fun to get on with David or with. I thought of somebody else that we could have on at the same time. If you've got more of these that you're scheduling, just throw these ideas around.
Sure.
We are scheduling a few, and we've only just announced this week's lineup, and we still have a ways to go. So Boots, the door is always open. Bay Area, right? The door is always open. So yeah, and David Way will be showing up towards the very end. I think he's going to be our grand finale. I think if the stars are aligning the way they seem to be,
Good.
But
maybe you can get everybody. To do all the circulation slapping. The last time that I went out to him, I was having him, because these flutes are really big, so I've always got different stuff happening. So he's my circulation and self-help deep tissue consultant.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, I don't know if you've ever actually met David like face to face, but aside from the fact that he's nearly 7 feet tall, right? The moment that he meets you, he's just like, okay, you've got tension here and here, and he'll just start like immediately like working out whatever it is that's going on. So it's just like within the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God, this guy's my best friend,
Cool.
Yeah, and likely pouring some good tea at the same time. So.
Yes, indeed. If only we've got to figure out a way to get that through the screen,
Yeah.
Right.
Download tea here, right?
Yeah. Kung Fu Cha app.
Yeah. There you go.
But I'm still working on a T tier, but not quite there yet,
Yeah, those are tricky. I did those on my crowdfunding campaign several years ago. I had a little bit of tea samples for everybody, and I think it was worth it. Yeah, but I did try to include instructions on a little bit of steeping the loose leaf stuff and measure them out. Get a bunch of little bags. Just logistics.
Exactly.
Just think about that. You'd be like, you're not going to be able to afford to send out entire bricks. But.
Oh yeah. Well, Curtis is has not even entered the realm of the logistics just yet. But
yeah, looking forward to it.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Curtis, did you have? Oh, look at this. We have another guest. Story comic. So this is Barney Smith, right? Who will be joining me tomorrow for Wuxia Wednesday. Barney Smith is an interviewer with his own show, Story Comics. Great to see you. He interviewed me last year during my campaign.
I think I might have watched that. That was a good interview. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got a sharp. He's one of those sharp ones. Yeah. And he's traveled the world, and he has his own tea stories. So we've gone down that rabbit hole as well. So he and I will be. I've got a special surprise for him that I don't want to spoil here, but we'll be having some fun tomorrow at around 2 p.m. PSD maybe. I got the schedule somewhere, but it'll be fun.
Speaking of fun, you just had another fun wordplay there. Is it because it's the year of the rabbit? Does it also mean it's the year of the rabbit hole?
It is, actually.
What does that mean?
Well, you would have to read the latest article on kungfumagazine.com to know, because tonight's guest, Gene Cheng, just released his article on the subject.
Oh, cool.
So I got that turn of phrase from him. So we'll have to ask him tonight. That'll be one of the hard questions we're going to put against them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephanie says Barney is great, so he's a fun person to talk to. It'll be good to catch up with him. I'm only sorry that you won't be able to make it, Curtis. But
Oh yeah, me too. Well, hopefully maybe we can connect sometime in the future. But
oh,
excellent.
definitely. I'll try and get you on his show because you two will have a good
Yeah.
time. You heard
Yeah.
that, Barney? Get Curtis on. But Curtis, do you have any more questions for Master Boots here while we've got the man?
I do, but I think I'm gonna hold those for later because my mind is still spinning from all the amazing information and just the performance. Absolutely riveting, and it's a unique thing when you're supposed to be the host of the show, but you feel like you're in the audience because you're enjoying it so much. So thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean the best thing was that I just got to look at this. Oh, where'd it go? So yeah, Barney and Curtis crossover in the near future. I
like
love
it.
one of the things I love is circling those things around. So
Oh,
it's
thank
great
you.
to see. And Boots,
Yeah.
I know I trust that you'll be back, but any closing commentary or
Well, just want to remind everybody how cool is Volume 1. Don't you want to make sure that you've already chosen a level for Volume 2? Yeah. Breathe deep. Mind clear like space. That's it. That's all you need. Those two things. Actually, I need some more tea, but that's what I'll get as soon as we're off. No, this has been really fun. These are the kind of conversations I'd like to have more of, and I do with my students. But which was another reason I left the Western instruments. Teaching clarinet and talking about Zen to seventh grade clarinetists was fun, and most of them appreciated it because woodwinders self-select to be they're already the cooler people, in my not so humble opinion. But still, to talk about a lot of this stuff as relates to this instrument is like a immediate goes with, as opposed to a kind of very similar to what you said about Taekwondo. Same thing where basically I realized, okay, as much as me and the bass clarinet have had a great time together, the origin of the design of that instrument comes essentially from marching band. And so where something kind of comes from, its sort of source point, origin, inception, intention, kind of sticks with it. And it's not that it can't do something completely the opposite. I mean, you could use a bass clarinet army to demilitarize the world, or like I believe that. But as a practice, when you're sort of tuning in deeper and deeper and deeper into the thing, there's a more magic to uncover, I think, when it's actually coming from an intention, like a lot of these arts came from. There was this coordination, connecting heaven and earth, for instance. Definitely. I never heard anybody suggest that in concert band in 9th or 10th grade, but as soon as I did hear it in Qigong class, it made a lot of sense to me, and I think we're doing that with these flutes also.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Boots, can I impose one request from you?
Sure, yeah.
So this is something I've mentioned to Curtis in describing, your artistry, is how you've been able to take like contemporary music and convert them into Shakuhachi flute. I know you've done that more than once. So I'm wondering if you could close us out with a little something that anyone will recognize.
Well, I could do a novelty number for sure, because I've been doing some bass lines with some of my students, and I was pointing out the difference between a Black Sabbath bass line or the bass line from Rapper's Delight, Good Times, for instance. So that might be the easiest, since I already have that. I mean, the small flute is out, but I'm not going to play all of Heaven and Hell, which is another Black Sabbath. But what is something shorter that I could do? Nothing that I've really practiced too much lately. But I could do a little bit of that, actually. Yeah, let's do a little bit of heaven and hell, because it's kind of anthemic, and then you get to see the flute that a lot of other people are playing. I may or may not do the whole tune, because it's kind of an epic tune itself.
That was excellent, excellent. Wow, so awesome, excellent.
Thanks. Yeah. Then next comes the guitar solo, and then the up tempo part, and so yeah, I'm because I'm playing my next show. We moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's great churches here, great architecture, so that's why I'm trying to play a couple shows coming up, and I can't help but if I don't really know the congregation or know that they have a music service that much, playing in a church, I'm going to bring all my. I've got a tune called Purgatory. I've got a tune called Beautiful Demon, and I've got Heaven and Hell. That's the cover song. So I think those want to be played in the church. So I'm working up that as the closer for this show in a couple weeks. So
very cool.
Well, definitely keep us posted on that, because I'll definitely want to elevate that voice and get people in that church.
Yeah.
Very good.
Excellent. So I think we have a little bit of business to wrap up for the show, Boots, but I can just say thanks again and look forward to our next time.
Yeah, definitely. Great to meet you. Thank you
Thanks
so much.
And congratulations on your great work, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Bye. That was too cool. That was way too cool. That was awesome. Great performance. Thank you, Patrick, for having him on.
Oh man, I just feel, like I said, I'm always saying, I just feel so fortunate to be to have gotten to know such talented individuals, and it's not just like the kung fu masters that I've gotten on the cover of a magazine, but just that circuitous life I've lived, has let me cross paths with folks like Boots.
Oh, definitely. It's that energy attracts energy, right? It's that kind of thing. But well, as we wind down, just to let everybody know, we'll be back at 8 p.m.
for our big Comics Fu show after dark. But before that, I'm going to be making an appearance at the Comic Book School. So their live stream, they have a YouTube channel, and it's comicbookschool.com.
And at what time will that be?
That will be at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Okay.
8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be there with my collaborator Vince, whose last name is escaping me. So sorry, Vince, but it's been a long few days. That said, we'll be discussing the animated trailer that he helped me that he created on my behalf, and
excellent.
We'll go into those details. So at the comic book school before we come back here tonight.
Mm-hmm. For our special guest Gene Ching, publisher of Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, you could say a martial artist. You know, he's definitely a Sifu at the Sifu level, a disciple of Shaolin. And if you really want to have your interest piqued, he did line dance for the Grateful Dead, and he went to the Shaolin Temple with RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. So those are just
truly, he's a you know, a scholar and a warrior. You know, like this whole day has been very much about like exploring, you know, the concept of Kung Fu in a non-violent fashion, right? Like the lesser known concepts behind it, and you know, having Gene on to just round it out in a kind of an ask me anything sort of context, I think just, you know, will make this an awesome whole, you know, like totally. we can discuss comics with him. We can discuss movies with him. We can discuss music, you know, the music. It's just about anything. So, you know, folks, come up any questions that haven't been answered yet will get answered tonight.
Definitely. And I think as we finish up here, we'll go ahead and remind everybody, check out our Kickstarter campaigns. And if you're interested, please make a pledge, share all those things. Again, our goal is to promote Kung Fu culture and Kung Fu as a martial art through our various projects. So what do you say we start with, since again, it is Tiger's Tuesday, let's start with a Tiger's Tale and then a little bit of Shadow Ghost. How's that sound, Patrick?
That sounds great. And then remember, I also have another special clip queued up. So we're doing the whole after credits sequence. We've been able to keep that going. So after our credits, stick around for another special tidbit.
Yep, our post-credit sequence, our post-trailer sequence.
Exactly. There's a theme happening here. I think we're pulling it off.
Definitely. So don't miss out. We're gonna go ahead and start now.
Hi, I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine this story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect. But it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by.
As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies. So I went to Chinatown trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented, and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, a Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in the series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shaku saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
Within the definition of Kung Fu doesn't mean fight or self-defense. I'm sure this is a tired conversation amongst your listenership, but Kung Fu just means hard work. And so in that regard, it's just your work ethic. It's just, your grit, your elbow grease, your midnight oil. It's, anything you put your skill to is your Kung Fu. And for some, it could be how well they tweet or, how way they play Call of Duty is whatever you put your time and energy into, you're going to get good.